and me, Jonathan.
That was quite a hiccup. What happened? Hello, everyone. Hi,
Hello.
Nadine.
Hey, Jonathan. How are you tonight?
I'm good. I'm running, apparently. Running.
Running,
But all
running here
good.
and there.
Hey, you know how it is. How about you?
I'm doing pretty good, I have to say. I was a little shocked. I know I shouldn't be, but just a little while ago, I went out of my office, which, for folks who don't know, doesn't have any real windows. It only has a make believe window. I went out of my office to go upstairs. I was a little surprised by how dark it was outside.
Because it's what time, Nadine?
Um,
6:40.
6:34, according to my
6:34.
friend Jonathan.
Yes.
According to my computer, adding Jonathan's extra hour in, it is 6:35 p.m. now.
So I'm running with that. And for everyone that knows, I'm against the daylight savings. I need my son back. But anyway, so welcome everyone to another Askable Adults Live, the show where we talk all about sex ed community and advocate for more awareness and visibility for transgender and gender non-conforming people. This week we're gonna be talking about this particular week, in which we are celebrating a very particular uh, nationwide awareness event. But before that, as always, we want to do our usual awareness. Oh my God, our usual acknowledgement and recognition, and that is that Black Lives Matter, especially this week, Black Trans Lives Matter.
Yes, and in keeping with that, we just want to acknowledge and lift up the Black Trans Advocacy Coalition. Um, their mission is to improve the Black trans human experience by overcoming violence and injustice in the world through the power, value, and love of all people. The Black Trans Advocacy Coalition is really committed to trans rights and recognizing trans rights as human rights. They particularly focus on health equity, housing or health equality, housing equality, and employment equality as some of the human rights. And there are three key human rights related to Black trans lives.
Exactly. So hopefully people that are watching this
Yeah.
will want to check that resource to learn a little bit more. There's also this link. It's also in the post. So whatever is easier. So check them out.
Yeah,
And
yeah, there's some really good information and testimonials there.
yeah, and of course this is not the only resource that there is, but hopefully once people start looking for other resources, they will also find more and share more. But if you needed something to start, then hopefully this will be
Yes.
it.
Yeah, very good place to start.
And who are these people that are talking to you? Do you want to start, Nadine? Do you start?
Do I want to start today?
To start?
My name is Nadine. I am the community liaison with Berks Teens Matter, and my pronouns are they and their and a.
Nice,
I thought I'd
nice.
throw that in there.
And my name is Jonathan Rodriguez. I use he, him, and él pronouns, and I'm the Youth and Health Resource Center coordinator of for of Bergstein's Matter. Yes, that.
Yes.
Yes. And like we said at the beginning, this week, there's we celebrate Transgender Awareness Week, it's celebrated from the 13th to the 19th of November, and it actually concludes with the Transgender Day of Remembrance on November 20th. And today we kind of want to talk about it, about why this week is important. And let's start with that. Nadine, why do we need a full week for transgender awareness?
That's a very big question, Jonathan. Uh, but I have to say, as we were planning and digging into information and kind of figuring about how to talk about this topic tonight, because it is a very big topic, um, one of the things I love about this job is that it gives me the opportunity to dig into things like this. As you said in the beginning, all things sex ed. And in doing that, sometimes I realize things that I know that I didn't know that I knew. If you can follow that statement, things that I know that I didn't know that I knew. And so, as I was exploring this topic, the one thing that I realized that became very clear to me was that tuning into transgender awareness can really help us to understand the way that our sexuality is embedded in every aspect of our human experience. And we talk all the time about, starting or having or keeping the conversations going, about normalizing the conversations, about advocating for comprehensive sex ed. Those are three of our big themes that come up again and again and again on Askable Adults. And the idea that these conversations are essential. And we talk about how our sexuality is not just the behaviors, but it's a part of everything that we are. But what I realized in working on tonight's content was that many of us don't have to think about how our sexuality impacts us on a day-to-day basis. People who are cisgender, meaning that their sex assigned at birth matches their gender identity, and heteronormative, otherwise known as heterosexual, those folks generally have the privilege of living their lives day to day without really having to give their sexuality too much thought outside of sexual behaviors and intimate physical relationships, unless and until something goes wrong, like with their health or with their functioning or something. And so it just kind of like felt like it hit me in the face that we are often saying that when we're talking about sexual health and sex ed, we're not just talking about the behaviors, but that's what people usually think about. And I'm sort of had this aha. That's what people usually think about, because otherwise they don't really have to think about it if they fit that cisgender heteronormative kind of definition of identity.
Yeah. And the when we talk about heteronormative, it's just the assumption that everyone is heterosexual, that everyone is exists in a binary male female, and that pretty much that's kind of like the not the basis, but that's just the regular or the normal that heteronormative is like the normal. So when you have people that don't necessarily fit in the heteronormative world, then like Nadine said, that's when we start thinking about it, and it shouldn't be like that. But that's why we need a more comprehensive sex ed, because it takes us out from what we think is the normal, because really there is no normal.
Yeah.
And that I just remembered that the other day I was listening to a podcast about in intersex visibility, which not the same as transgender, but it popped into my head because they say, with intersex people, they want to conform us. They want to subject us to surgeries and to anatomically changing procedures without our consent. But then you have transgender, since they're very young, but then you have transgender people that some of them will want to pursue certain procedures. And remember, not every transgender person needs a procedure to be transgender. But then we deny them that. So what's up with that? So yeah,
That's a really interesting observation. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Without consent, and then when people have a sense of what their identity is and are trying to align their physical being with their identity,
Mhm.
then we want to say no, 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 no.
Exactly. And like what you were talking about privilege, that privilege goes to many different aspects of the human condition. We don't generally think about the life of another person that is not like us, that experiences the world differently than us. For example, able-bodied people, heteronormative or heterosexual, white, and usually male people don't think about the lives of the others, and how our privilege impacts and even harms people that are just not the same. Or at least we don't think it does, but privilege impacts the privileged too, even if we don't perceive it. And I don't know if people will make that note, but I mentioned male, I didn't mention female, because again, we live in a male dominated culture, a patriarchal culture, which also subjugates people that are not male or not male identified. Um, but that also harms them because of, for example, when we talk about toxic masculinity, is not that men are inherently evil, but this society, this culture that in which we have all been raised and been part of is based on very toxic traits that come from the white supremacy and the privilege of being male. So I think it's very important to make a note of that, and have it in our radar for when we are talking about many different topics, including transgender rights and transgender people's topics.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just making me think as human beings, we have many things in common, but we also are unique individuals. And that doesn't mean that one individual is better than another, or one type of individual is better. It doesn't need to be like that. The great diversity of it all can honor the individuality and the uniqueness of everyone and celebrate that. And really today, since we're talking about transgender, what I would like to say is a big thank you to transgender persons, especially those who've had the courage to stand up and speak out so that we can all be talking about what it means to be transgender, and understanding the differences and still our common humanity. So I want to thank those folks in particular today for inspiring us to talk about this bigger reality, so that we can think about it and choose to be a part of the change that is really creating a more inclusive world.
In that piece about courage also makes me think about a couple of things actually, that an author that I've been following, their name is Alok Menon, and they say, some people say, oh, you're so courageous, or whatever, but really, where does that courage comes from? Probably just from the will to exist. In what, and that's, I think that's a very important piece, because you have courage to exist in a world that fights so much to not be as free as you are or as you are inspiring to be, and that will fight to the bone to subjugate itself to whatever perceptions it had from the world, from the heteronormative world. And actually, this author, they write about gender. They seek to push the gender binary. They, it's just an amazing. I don't know. I think about them as a very wise person. And they said in a interview, and this is kind of like paraphrasing, that many people are threatened by the mighty power of transgender and gender nonconforming people, especially those who are Black, who are Indigenous, or who are of color. And I kind of want to make echo of their words, because why will you pursue to cage another person's existence? Um, and I think that part is very important, since some there is a reason for Transgender Awareness Week and Transgender Day of Remembrance, which we also will be talking a little bit in a few minutes. But the fact that we need this, we need to create awareness about the existence of people, really should, tell us how important this is.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think sometimes people get pushed. I'm just thinking as I'm listening to you, thinking about like all of what all of us have been living with. You know, we know this, we hear this all the time in the last 20 months or so, or something like that. And I know it can be really unsettling.
Mhm.
Like, our ideas of the way things are supposed to be all seem to be tossed up in the air, and that can be really uncomfortable. But sometimes it's things like that. And when I think of transgender people and courage, as you brought up, now sometimes it's things like that, as uncomfortable as it can be. Sometimes you get pushed to the point where you cannot not do what you have to do. And I think that I have a lot of respect for all people who have been oppressed in any way, shape, or form, and they come to a point, a crossroad, a flexion point in their lives where they know that if they're going to truly live, they have to stand up and make statements and take actions that are going to further their ability and as a side effect, other people's ability to actually really live.
And even put their lives in the front lines to
Mm-hmm.
to push, again, I mentioned this word, the visibility of people like them, so that others can exist at peace, um
Yeah.
or again, just exist. It's just that.
Mm-hmm.
um it's really, I think it's really powerful stuff in work that they are doing to, again, free everyone.
Yes.
Because I'm thinking about ah uh Renee Taylor. No,
Yes.
wait. Yes. Ah, I'm missing her name. Ah,
I can see her in my mind.
yes, I have her book. I'll get that name. But Black women are charging towards freedom. Either you jump in or you don't stand in their way. But then you have transgender and gender non-conforming people fighting also for freedom of the
Mm-hmm.
self. And I think that should also be highlighted. Um, and since oh, we're gonna say something, Nani?
No,
Oh, okay.
I'll
and
let you go on.
Okay. And Transgender Awareness Week is used to bring up topics that empower or affect transgender folks. And while getting ready for tonight's episode, actually, no, I think, yeah, it was you, Nadine. It was you, Nadine. I think it was you. I'm giving
I
you
think it might have been me. I think it might have been me.
a nothing found on GLAAD, GLAAD,
AAD.
which serves as a non-governmental media monitoring organization. An article about, well, it wasn't an article, it was
They shared about a documentary called Disclosure, which it's something that's on Netflix,
yep, yep.
and shows the experience of a lot of these are. Now I haven't seen this, so these were. Let me clarify this: were they transgender actors and actresses, or were they people who played gendered persons, or
Well,
both?
they were transgender actor, actresses, artists, producers, directors,
Okay, okay,
who were portraying trans
transgender
transgender
person.
characters too. Yeah,
Okay,
in
okay.
Hollywood, like yeah,
So, and that's still available on Netflix. And do you care?
yes.
Yeah, we want to encourage people, myself included. Um, I'm going to access next Netflix off of somebody's Netflix, so
I'll
I
give
can
you
take a
mine.
look
I'll give you mine.
and watch it to get some insight into that experience. But can you tell us a little more about it since you have seen it?
I saw it a while ago, but it's very insightful. And certainly, I haven't seen many of the series that they talk about there. For example, I don't watch NCIS or whatever Nip Talk or whatever series. I don't necessarily have seen them, but in some of the series that, for example, are like about cops or stuff like that, usually transgender folks are like the dead person, or the person that was raped, or the person who was um, whatever. But it's always with a negative connotation. They are never the police person. They are never the agents. They're never an alive person, and if they are, they're always like shady. Or and I remember a clip that they shared about a series, and it was like, oh, you kind of like, don't betray me, but you didn't tell me the truth. And it's like, well, she didn't lie. Like it's like, is it necessary for people to just like, hey, it's that's why it's
Yeah.
called disclosure.
I was going to say,
um,
and most of us don't disclose everything and anything about ourselves to
mhm.
people.
And because there's also that perception. I might mix a little bit, but I'm thinking about that specific clip. um a lot of people say, oh, and a lot of people are meaning men, oh, but what if I hook up with this person and they don't tell me that they're transgender? I want to, well, who is telling you that you're gonna hook up with a transgender person? Like are is like automatically a transgender person will be
Wanting to hook up with you anyway.
yeah, hold the horses. You're not that big of a big shot. Take calm down. But it's always this almost like this gay panic or transphobic panic, really. That, oh, if I'm with a trans person, I'm gonna be gay, or I'm gonna be this, or I'm gonna be that. But it's always what does to you, and really, well, are we talking about how it affects the other person? And it's kind of like always goes for the pleasure, or what the man can gain or lose. um it's really horrible. There
It's
has
from a very narrow perspective, and also with the assumption that by virtue of being a trans person, somehow that's going to do harm to me
exactly,
because the other person is trans. Somehow that harms me, which
exactly. And even if it's just a person that lives in the community, how does their them living affects you?
Yeah. Like you
So
don't why we don't want them moving into the neighborhood kind of thing.
abs-
That kind of that kind of idea. Like
ex-
somehow that's gonna
affects
heaven. Yeah.
something in
Yeah.
the lives of straight people. I don't know. But disclosure is a really good and insightful documentary. Hopefully, more people will want to check it out. But one of the 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 actors,
Characters,
not
actors.
actors, that appears. I remember his name is Elliot Fletcher, and I remember him because I used to watch a series called The Fosters, which it was in ABC, and then ABC changed
I've heard of
again.
that. Yeah.
So he it was very interesting because he was, I believe, he was like the second transgender person that appeared in a show, and I don't know. I think he mentioned that he had a good experience, and he was treated with respect, etc. But for the amount of people that say, for example, oh, a straight person can do a gay person, or a cisgender person can portray a transgender person. Transgender actors and actresses definitely are not having the same opportunities, and they are absolutely not being cast to play cisgender people. And
Mm.
so you have a bunch of actors and actresses in this documentary, for example, and they are just a selected few, all portraying transgender characters. But even Laverne Cox, who is one of the producers, she was supposed to portray as was I think she was supposed to portray a cisgender woman, and the show got canceled. It was like, how dare you put a transgender woman to portray a
In a
cisgender woman?
cisgender role.
And it's like, what are you talking about?
It's called acting.
It's exactly, and it's acting, but it's kind of like on the inverse. You don't have a problem when a cisgender person portrays a transgender person. You actually defend it, but then you don't want to do the same backwards.
Yeah, I think it's
So
called discrimination.
exactly, and again, it's the fact that they are not having the same opportunities as
Hmm.
cisgender actors. That's what really makes the difference. Because a cisgender actor will always have opportunities to find, a character to play, but a transgender actor or actress, kind of like they will.
Pigeonholed, we call it, right? Into
Exactly, exactly. So it's just like, check it out. And we hopefully you will see what we can do to support trans actor and actresses, and just the representation as a whole in the media, and
hmm
going forward.
right.
Spoiler, let them tell their stories. But yeah, that was a really long rant.
It's okay. That's part of what we're here for tonight. And I like the spoiler alert. Let them tell their stories. Yes.
So yeah.
So, so this awareness week, Jonathan, concludes with Transgender Day of Remembrance, right?
Yep. That's right.
Um, that was started by a Gwendolyn Ann Smith, who was a trans activist, correct?
Yep.
Um, and it began as a vigil in memory of her friend Rita Hester, who was killed way back in 1998.
Yeah.
So every year, and I know it hasn't been, I think it has not been since 1998, but I know for quite some years now, and certainly nationally, there have been places at every year after that on November 20th
Yeah.
We remember all the transgender and gender non-conforming people who we have lost at the hands of transphobia, sexism, misogyny, white supremacy, toxic masculinity, and there's one other word that fits in there that
Misogynoir.
that's a hard one for me to pronounce. That sounds kind of Frenchish.
Kind of, yeah. It's the it's misogyny, but towards black women
Okay,
or
specifically
black
toward.
femme people. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. So this year in the United States has been the most lethal year so far, with a death toll of 73 individuals since
Mhm.
last November 21st,
Yeah.
of 2020 up until this point in time.
Yeah.
Hopefully, for the remainder of this week, that number won't change.
Yeah. Hopefully. Um, it's yeah. It's a very tough day because
Yeah,
we are remembering all those people that were lost. Um, and yeah, last year was also the most lethal one, and that means that if this is the most lethal one, then that number is increasing. And most of the people that have been killed or that have died during this year are either Black or Latinx people, and these are the ones. And this is very important. These are the ones that are reported, and not only reported but also um, correctly
correctly identified.
identify as a trans or gender non-conforming individual, because in many instances their uh, you know their cases, they are misgendered. They simply don't identify them. So it's a very complicated situation because the ones that we know, it's pretty much because of the people that know them, and it's like, hey,
Right.
this is a transgender person. So it's very tough. But speaking of which, here at Reading, we there will be an observance that day for TDOR, how commonly is also called, which will take place on Calvary Church, Calvary United Church of Christ on Saturday, November 20th at 7 p.m. There will be the reading of the names of people who lost their lives this past year, as well as messages from transgender advocates and allies for all those who are present. And we hope that you consider attending and support, showing your support, learning more, and hopefully inspire yourself to take action, to end the killings, to end the murdering of transgender people, including kids. It's
Right. Right.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
It's a tragedy and a shame of our nation, and not just our nation, but around the world. Um, we don't only want to remember, though, those who have been murdered in this last year. As we were thinking and planning and um, creating our time here tonight, we also remembered, and so we want to remember here the youth across the country who have been subject to erasure by legislation seeking to deny their rights to full participation in athletics in a way that aligns with their gender identity. There's been a lot of that in the news over this last year. We're not going to revisit all of that right here and now, but for more about that topic, if you didn't see it or if you want to be reminded, you can always view our episode called Talking About Gender Affirming Care that we did earlier this year with Sam King from the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. And I'll just kind of add that CHOP is a great resource. it's the most local resource we have for full spectrum gender affirming care for youth.
Mhm.
And they have great services and great people there offering those services. So please do check that out if in any way that's a need that you have or someone that you know and care about has.
And also, you know, the the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia is in Philadelphia.
Philadelphia.
But if anyone that is watching this is in need of more support, there's also the LGBT Center of Greater Reading. They offer many different services to transgender folks, in including counseling, support groups, and more, and linkage to service. So hopefully people will find support in these different places.
Yes. So, how
Yeah,
should we wrap up our time here tonight, Jonathan?
yeah. I think we well, Nadine again found a couple of tips about gender that hopefully people will take home and use them in their lives. Do you want to start, Nadine, or do you?
I could start. And these tips were created by a teacher based on their experience working with youth and working with transgender youth. But these are tips that really go for everybody, transgender and gender conforming and gender non-conforming
Mhm.
persons, if you think about it, that you are the expert on your own gender. There are so many different ways to present your gender, whether it's masculine, feminine, or something else entirely. And how you present yourself is up to you.
Another tip is that a person's gender doesn't define their interests and vice versa. People should be able to explore whatever interests them in, including hobbies, including professions, including likes and dislikes. The gender doesn't have to do with any of that. Not colors, not toys, nothing of that matter.
Yes. Yes. And I would say in my lifetime, we've come a ways in that, but we still have a very long way to go.
Hmm.
So remember that. Tip number 3 is that everyone, regardless of age, can and should talk about gender and gender roles. Young people often know more than we think, and sometimes just may need, especially really young people who are developing their vocabularies, may just need help to find the words or learn the words. Um, but also, even when they don't quite have the words, if you listen to them and help them find the words, you might be surprised at the few things that they could teach you.
Absolutely. And the last tip is that gender is not black and white. Alternative, gender is fluid, exists on a continuum, and is not necessarily like sometimes they will explain gender in a line, going from one extreme to the other. Sometimes gender is just like a mess of colors, and that is beautiful.
Yeah.
That also makes me think about the author that I mentioned, Alok Menon, and they mention in this interview when they identify as non-binary, so they don't they don't identify neither as a male or a female. So when they were growing up, the kids will tease them because they were a very feminine boy, but then they grew up and they started playing with gender, and now it's like no, 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 no. And they tend to tell them that they were they were a girl, but then they grew up to play with their gender and to feel comfortable in their own skin, and then they were like, no, 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 you're a man, dress like it, act like it. So it's always to kind of like, um why do we have to conform to everyone's expectations?
Yeah.
Is
Why don't we allow people to be who they are?
Yeah, and why do we find why do we think that we are entitled to anyone's life? Um, so hopefully, in this Transgender Awareness Week, we will um, we will think about this stuff, and we will
Yes.
talk about this stuff,
Yes.
and we will learn more about this stuff,
Yes.
and we will become better for the future generations, because another
Yes.
generation is coming and it's so beautiful.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So that's been all for today. Hopefully, folks will remember that the Transgender Day of Remembrance is coming up, and show your support. This is not the only one that will be happening. I'm pretty sure that in many different places, from whatever you are watching us, there might be one, even virtual. So
Yes.
be sure to tune in or to show support or to attend, because it's important. It's important to remember those who lost their lives along the way, but also
To su-
listen to the ones that are alive and the ones who are surviving, because surviving is
yes.
not a way of living. We actually want them to live
And to thrive.
and to thrive.
And we can be part of making that possible.
Exactly. But we need to show up and take action.
Yes.
So that's all for today. Hopefully, everyone will take part on the different things that are happening, and we'll see all of you next week.
Next Tuesday. We have a special
Bye.
guest next Tuesday.
Yes! But you have to tune in to check it out.
You have to tune in. We're not going to tell you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye bye.